They get that little bit of stillness, and it's like, all right, something's coming. Well, welcome back to another great episode of Secure Out Podcast. Always, I'm your host, Danny Caballero, and today I have the pleasure of bringing you John Dailey, MARSOC writer, coach. And today, this is your episode, sir. We're going to talk to you about your life during the military, after, and one of the things that I'm passionate about talking a lot more this season is mentorship, not only within the military, but how do we bring all those lessons learned into our civilian workspace? How do we mentor, coach, and guide our non-military brothers and sisters?
Great. Well, I'm super happy to be here. And I've been told that before I do anything, I have to say that, my opinions are mine alone and don't reflect the United States Special Operations Command or MARSOC or where I still work or anybody else, or my wife's. She was adamant, none of my opinions reflect hers. So just John Dailey's opinions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So John, tell us, how did you find yourself into the world of MARSOC? Because you were in it from the beginning.
Yeah, I was really fortunate throughout my career. But I started as an infantryman, and then was moved into a sniper platoon very early on. That step kind of led to moving to Force Recon. After that, where I spent the bulk of my career, and then in following 9/11, the Marine Corps was told, the Secretary of Defense recognized that there's going to be more of a requirement for special operators. So, SF formed another battalion. The SEALs were told to form more teams, and the Marine Corps, who had opted out in '87, when SOCOM stood up, was told that, hey, you're going to participate. So I was really, fortunate to be selected to be one of the team leaders in that first test bed unit. It was called Detachment 1, and that's largely that time. That's what my book's about. But that unit existed for 3 years, and then when, post our deployment to Iraq in 2004, the decision was that MARSOC would, stand up, a full command. And when that happened, Det 1 was disestablished. I moved straight over to MARSOC to help get the school started and figure out how we were going to train Marine Raiders.
Yeah.
And so
it was definitely a tumultuous time period, those early years, because everybody thinks that it would be an easy thing to adapt, but Marine Corps Command, they didn't see it that way.
The Marine Corps has never really been a fan of any organization within it that considers itself special or really different. It was the same way with the Marine Raiders in World War II that we draw our lineage towards. Yeah. They only made it for 2 years. Even though they were responsible for the some initial landings in Guadalcanal and Macon Island, and you're really holding the island of Guadalcanal. After 2 years, the Marine Corps got rid of them, and so it's been the Marine Corps is we're really, really good at what we do, but we're that way because we're very kind of tight knit and parochial. So that's we had some fights in the early days of MARSOC to remain in existence, right?
Yeah, fighting for that place at the table, and then having to constantly advocate for yourselves as a fighting force. And that's a beauty of MARSOC, that the guys within there, they've all had to really live up and be that walking standard. In SF, you can get away with screwing up, and it's not going to tank your entire mission. Within MARSOC, it's every man has to be accountable and has to really understand that, like, when I put on that uniform, when I'm presenting myself to the rest of the force, like, I got to represent for the entirety of MARSOC.
Yeah, and that's the Marines always kind of feel that way. But we're, to put it in context, MARSOC is, I think, less than 10% of the size of USASOC.
Yeah.
So we're small. We've always been kind of prided ourselves on doing more with less, and that certainly transitions over into MARSOC. So, and we also, one of the things we pride ourselves on is starting with the Marines who've already been in the Marine Corps, so we don't have there's not the opportunity to go to the recruiter in high school and say, hey, I want a chance to be a Raider. You gotta do a little time, get a little dirt on your fingernails before you get that opportunity.
It is. I would have to imagine it is a big step up, and rightly so. Looking for the senior candidates, looking for the guys who are well established, that have proven and have that commitment already there. Like they've already shown, like, hey, I'm in here for the long haul. In those early years, what was it like? What was that like going through those first deployments? We often focus on the Navy SEALs, Ranger, Green Berets. They have, GPC cards, get whatever you need off the shelf. I know from talking to a lot of guys, it wasn't like that for MARSOC. It wasn't this like, hey, we're going to give you everything. It's very hard fought, to survive in combat.
Yeah. And I can only talk about like my deployments with Det 1, or deployment with Det 1. When I came to MARSOC, I spent all my time in the school. But when we stood up with Detachment 1, the budget that they had set around and figured out was inadequate to outfit us, right? So just we had to buy weapons and buildings to live in, and everything, communication. There was nothing existed. So toilets and toilet paper for the the duration. Quad cons, put stuff in vehicles, and all the maintenance stuff for the vehicle. So it was an interesting time being able to, and we had some folks that were able to borrow that really understood the soft procurement side of things. A good buddy of mine, came over and really helped us out and was able to, kind of show us how we could, recruit money from other places and pay the bills. But, at the end of the day, we were very well outfitted. But it's always with the Marine Corps, like I said, we pride ourselves on doing more with less. So, especially the early days in MARSOC, when the Marine Corps had no idea of what, special operations was, or in some cases they thought they did, no idea of what equipment was required, or why the equipment the Marine Corps had wasn't good enough. Really, before they figured out the funding streams and how SOCOM would take care of its, soft, peculiar type of equipment and responsibilities. So there was a lot, and I'm not a budget guy, I sat in the back row on the periphery of some of those meetings, and it was just, mind was, blown when people start talking, big, numbers with a whole lot of zeros behind them to outfit a force, a brand new force.
Yeah. When you climb up in rank, we often, like, for the outside perspective, like, it's always cool. It's always fun. You're always in. It's like, no, but a lot of times when you grow in rank, now you're sitting in these meetings going over the numbers. And that's the boring but vital situation that we live in. It's how do we make sure we get everything we want, everything we need? And you got to get it before the end of the year. And if there's any money left at the end of the year, come up with something to buy. Dear God, please come up with something to buy.
There's a saying that's inexperienced tacticians discuss tactics, but experienced tacticians discuss logistics, and that's absolutely true. The special operations organizations do nothing without the support backbone and infrastructure that allows them to be successful. And I saw that, which the first time it really boggled my mind was when I was with Force Recon in 2001. We were on deployment, hanging out in Australia at a pub, when the soccer game that was on TV switched, and it was the Trade Center, the towers, and it was kind of late evening, 10 or 11 o'clock at night there. And then before we knew it, we were sitting off the coast of Afghanistan, and they, trying to make a 800-mile movement, in helicopters, and figuring out how many people you could get on board, how many pallets of water, how many rolls of toilet paper, how many batteries of each of the million types of batteries that we use. So that really, being able to watch that was wildly boring, but also incredibly fascinating, because it was, nobody could have done the things they did on the ground were it
Yeah.
not for the logisticians and the people crunching numbers and figuring out pallet size, space, and
Yeah.
cubes.
Yeah, it's all fun and games until your helo crashes because somebody didn't allocate the right thing to go on that pallet with human beings and the weights were off. That's
Exactly.
that's the things that we forget about when we're young and so gung ho to get in combat. We only focus on rifles and bullets, and the reality is it's a giant machine. Even the smallest organizations, you make your money on the support mechanism. That's why it's an imperative. Like we live and die by the support structures that we develop before we go into the fight, and our support people are the best in the world.
Yeah.
You can't do it without them. You can't. One of my closest friends, he was one of those guys early on in GWAT. He was a support kid, and he said to himself, "I'm not that important." And next thing you know, he did an entire career as a support NCO, and his mission was the most important thing in those early days. Like, where are you getting your bullets? Where are you getting your batteries, your fuel? It was those guys on convoys, those guys that were fighting out of their soft skin vehicles, getting the vital resources to our troops. And nowadays, we don't think about that. It's one of the biggest components to any fighting force. And we saw it play out with Russia recently.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, an army moves on its stomach, or on its logistics. Early in Afghanistan, we got a bad batch of fuel, and a whole Marine Expeditionary Unit kind of ground to a halt because the just bad fuel.
Yeah.
So there's just so many things that go into that, other than what we think of as the fun stuff and the warfighting stuff.
Yeah.
So it's always good to give a shout out to the people that don't get it, who are behind the scenes.
and I would argue that those lessons learned, those hard lessons learned of failures, those become amazing teaching and coaching lessons later on in life. As you're mentoring and helping people understand how to plan out to accomplish the impossible, all those hard lessons learned are easy things you can pull out of your bag and be like, oh, wait, I have a situation we can talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, not just with coaching military folks, but making sure that a civilian organization has, if you thought everything through, right?
Yeah.
The first question I ask is, where are you going? Right? Do we have a really clear idea of, the 10-inch grid on the map that you're headed for? Because we really, we're wasting our time or spinning our wheels if we're not heading in the right direction. So before we, run off in a million different, azimuths, let's sit down, get a whiteboard, and let's a map and pinpoint the objective, just like you would in training or in an operation.
That is so, that's such a easy step that so many people are lacking. There's all this fire and passion, and you want to do something right now, whether it's you want to bring the next greatest product to market, you want to do the greatest, you want to be a great individual in your organization, but you have all this power burning within you and you're just spinning your wheels, but there's no direction. At the end of the day, you come home and you're like, yeah, I did so much, I feel that, but what's that? How do you drive that? How do you actually put it towards something of purpose and usefulness?
Yeah, what do you have to show for it? At the end of a hard day's work, you should be able to look back and say, hey, I accomplished this and this, 2-3 things. And I generally think that, hey, if you can knock 3 things out, that's a pretty good solid day's work. And you can be proud of it.
I often look back and I realize the analogy of picking things up from one pile and moving it and making another pile in the military. We see that in the civilian space all the time. After your time in service, looking at where you're at now, how difficult is it to mentor and coach? Or is it perfectly in line with how you were leading in the military?
I think it's very close, and that's what drove me to it. I started, I'm not even sure how the initial kind of getting started, the idea came up, but I think I was talking to a friend that works in the civilian sector, and he was kind of venting about, hey, my organization is this, and this. And I'm like, well, did you ever just, some really basic things that, a young NCO knows, right?
Yeah.
And, his eyes got real wide and he's like, hey, can you come in and talk to my bosses about this? I'm like, well, yeah, yeah, man. And then I realized that there's, almost a one for one. You can really look at anything in the military planning process or the military decision making process, and tie it directly to any other organization. And I think that I found that there's a little bit of military worship or hero worship, in the from the people who hadn't been in, and that's nice. But if you kind of make things tactical for them, right? Kind of explain, hey, on a patrol, you've got to, your primary concern's got to be security. Hey, here's how that applies to you. You've got to plan for what might happen and have immediate action drills at the ready. And they seem to respond well to that. So that's really how I got started.
Yeah. And that's something that I realized as well. There's a lot of people that will seek us out for the background, and that gets our foot in the door. But then the next part is being able to take the lessons learned, what made you successful in the military, be able to craft an approach that takes, whether it's working with somebody that works in a plastic production company or somebody that's in a supply or even a software company, be able to break down their issues, understand their pain points. And I think that we're perfectly suited for that. We're often put in places where the problem is really abstract. It's ill-defined. And it's like, oh, I got a planning process. Like the planning guide that they give us, it's a pain in the ass. But I tell you what, in the civilian world, it works. It still works.
Yeah, we don't always, as a military, we don't always execute plans really well.
Yeah.
but we have a really good process for developing them. And we think through everything, and particularly working with a kind of an our line of work, a host nation force, that probably has no clue what they want or where they're going. And so you've got to, but you also can't come in and say, hey, here's what you're going to do. Right. So you've got to make it, their idea. You've got to, finesse a little bit to make sure that, we're accomplishing our mission. We're enabling them to, help us accomplish our mission in the future. And like you said, I think the military pedigree or resume will get you in the door, but that won't last long unless you're providing real value to whomever the customer may be. There's a lot of people that have that idea that, hey, I'm out now. I'm going to be, there's 20 million, former military consultants, former, special operations guys on LinkedIn. You could, if they kicked all those guys off, there would be like 2 people on LinkedIn. Right? And I'm sure lots of them are good, but if you're not consistently, showing value, you're providing your customer with a benefit, then their appreciation for your service will only go so far.
Now, I want to take it back to your transition specifically, which is a constant issue and a point of fear for a lot of guys that come from our communities. I mean, we are willing to go into the unknown. We're willing and comfortable going into firefights, doing insane things. But the moment that the sun starts to set in our careers, a lot of brothers start getting a lot of fear. They start feeling that trepidation of, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I've never done or thought about what I would do next. And they begin to be paralyzed by fear. And it's almost like they're completely unaware of who they truly are. Like, dude, you've done the impossible. You've literally done the impossible. You've been through things that half of our American populace would never even dream of doing, and even less would even actually take on. What do you got to fear? When you went through your transition, what got you out of that fear and into taking actual steps towards success?
Well, mine was a little bit atypical, right? I think because I retired like 2 weeks later, went back to work at the same place, kind of the same job as a civilian, and I've worked there for 16 years now at the Marine Raider Training Center, which I love. but a couple of years ago, I realized that I wanted to do something else. I wanted a third act, right?
Yeah.
and that I had, the Marine Corps had given me so many skills, that I could use. So I'm still in the mode of kind of working both gigs, which leaves me really tired. But at some point I'll be able to step away. I also really, really, like I said, I love what I do. I love being around Marines. I was at 5 this morning. I was out, rucking with a bunch of young guys, and it was just a phenomenal time. So, it's really hard to let that go, but I do want to.
Yeah.
That's
like a transition within a transition. That's
yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of guys find those GS positions and they're like, oh man, like I love what I'm doing. I'm gonna transition into this. I've got a friend that found himself in that situation. One moment he's like, I can't wait to get out. I'm done. And then finds a job, another state, doing the same thing he was doing in the airport. He's like, you know what? I love this. Every morning I wake up, I go do the one part of the job that I loved. I work out with the guys. I've got access to things that I love to do and work with. Like, this is it. This feels home. This feels right. And a lot of guys do that. And then just like you just said, it's like, oh, now I'm getting that itch. Now, like, I'm wanting that pivot. And yeah, I can imagine it's extremely exhausting.
yeah. I think I really want to do something like totally on my own. I mean, the Marine Corps kind of took me at 17 and taught me everything I needed to know. I was able to use all of that for now 16 years as a civilian. So for what, 38 years, I've kind of been, sucking off the government tit. So, it's, at some point I've got to grow up and get a real job. But, it's, and that's the other thing, because there certainly are, civilians that work, that people have bad experiences with, people that are, don't keep in mind that it's all about the man and woman, on the battlefield, the warfighter. I'm fortunate that, I'm working with the same types of people that I've always been working with. So I don't, have any issue, reminding myself of that. But, I do get to, practice my coaching on a lot of those, younger, Marines. So it's good, but that really kind of started the love of that, and the idea that, hey, maybe I can do this on the free market.
Absolutely. I got to ask you, how rewarding is that to be connected with the next generation of Marines? Like, that's like I know when I get a moment or get a chance to just connect with another young Green Beret, it is one of the most rewarding moments. Like, they're the next generation, being able to impart just a little bit of knowledge. What does that feel like? What is that like?
Absolutely. That's the reason I'm still there. That's the best part of it.
It's and a drug.
And they're super receptive. They want to kind of suck in everything. There are people that, they've been doing it since, I don't know, thousands of years, that, this generation is weak and soft and they're not hard like us. But, there's, massively, incredibly capable, folks coming through our training, and I'm sure coming through everybody's training. So I think our future's in pretty good hands, pretty capable hands.
Yeah. We tend to forget that the same things that people are saying now about the current group and generation of service members are the same thing people were saying about us when we first raised our hand and wanted to serve. And we went through a meat grinder. I think we did pretty damn good for ourselves. The right people will find themselves in the jobs. The standards aren't being dropped to the point where it's just an online course. It's still really friggin' hard to make a Marine. It's still really friggin' hard to make an infantryman. It's still really friggin' hard to make a MARSOC Raider and a Green Beret. Yeah. We're still targeting and actively recruiting the individuals that want to accomplish the impossible. They're going to find them. And maybe the pools get shorter and smaller for a little bit, but then it'll get bigger and wider and we'll get more people in. They're out there.
They definitely still exist. They're definitely still tough and rugged, and but they're smarter, I think.
Yeah.
Smarter than we were, obviously. As the battlefield changes, and we're seeing that now. Technology is. It blew up, during our time from what the guys in Vietnam, were accustomed to. When I first came in, a Prick 77 radio, that was it.
Yes.
It had a little knob to turn to the frequency.
That same radio, I was talking to a younger Green Beret on my team about him before I retired, and they were looking at me like I was an absolute friggin' alien. They're like, "What are you talking about?" But yeah, like, you guys don't go through all these radios? Like, no, we have no idea what you're talking about. I'm like, fuck, I'm not that old. Tech is
some things have absolutely gotten easier, but the rucks are still heavy. The miles are still long, and they're still the water's still cold. All of those things haven't changed.
Yeah, the misery factor is still there and will always be there. When you started thinking about writing a book, what was the first thing that came to mind? What was the first driving force for that book?
So I took an unusual kind of path. While I was on active duty, right before I retired, I finished a bachelor's degree in Homeland Security. I was thinking I was going to be a security consultant, all right, like everybody. Everybody, now that everybody's a coach instead.
I pivoted from that as well.
So I got a degree in Homeland Security. I was going to take the world by storm, and I didn't do that, and I realized that I had the GI Bill to use because I had used tuition assistance for the bachelor's degree. I also retired just about a year before you were allowed to give the GI Bill benefits to your spouse or children. So I was, damn well going to use every last penny of it. All right. Yeah. So I went back. I really said, hey, what's the easiest thing I could do? And I wound up getting a master's degree in liberal studies and studied mainly literature. And I've always loved to read, always loved to write, though I didn't do much of it. And then when I finished that, I realized there was still a pretty good chunk of money left. And one of my professors recommended applying to the Master of Fine Arts writing program at the University of North Carolina in Wilmington. And it, how I got in, I don't know. It's actually like a very selective. It's one of the best in the nation. Maybe they had some veterans quotas they had to fill, but I sent in the only thing I had written, and they accepted me. And so I got to go, spend 3 years, studying writing. All nighttime and after work and whatnot. But the culmination of that was to write a book. That was your thesis. You had to turn in a book. And I had gone in for for fiction. So I wrote a novel that it's not that great. Right.
That's a horrible sales pitch, John.
Yeah. Well, the novel, right? I'll go back to it. It's a good story. I need to do it, but it needs a little work. But I wound up really lucking into this, meeting this lady who was writing a book about the Marine Raiders and had reached out to me for some questions about World War II Raiders. And, in the process, I was like, I write. And she was like, can you send me something? And so I sent her a thing I had written about being in the JOF in Iraq in 2004. And she was like, hey, do you mind if I send this to my agent? And he got a hold of me. He's like, hey, I'd like to be your agent. Let's turn this into a book. So I'm like, yeah, I could do that in a year. And, he got me a book deal, and I spent a year, banging out kind of the story of my time in Detachment 1 and the startup of MARSOC. So it was, it's kind of a whirlwind, when you decide you're going to write a book in your spare time.
In the thing that I'm realizing, a lot of us have, we tend to discount what we've gone through, and we don't value it. We are very quiet about what we've done. Green Berets are horrible about this to a point where we're losing our history, the older history, because guys don't want to talk about it. We have some amazing Green Berets like John Stryker-Meyer, James Dayskull, who are writing, they're prolific writers, and they're putting out their history out there. But our generation of soft professionals, we need to start kicking it into gear and start writing about what we experienced, what we saw. It's vital. It's important. I look at authors who have written, Alone at Dawn is a great example. A lot of people don't know about the history of those early years of what men were able to accomplish on the ground. And when we look at MARSOC right now, and we look at the individuals that we have, some service members that have written, but I think our stories need to be told. Our soft professionals need to kick it into gear. You need to find some time and tell the stories, because even as you sit here and you say, it's a little bit like, no, like your book, and we got to promote it. We got to get it out there because you're part of something that our youth need to read about. And even us, our guys our age, and be able to revisit that moment in time.
Well, I think, for me, about a year and a half ago, I had the opportunity to bring a bunch of the Det 1 guys out to MARSOC, and most of them had never seen it. The facilities, the compound. We were living, literally in like plastic, those pop-up sprung shelters. We were, so to come out and see, multi-million-dollar ranges and shoot houses and preaching houses and dog kennels and everything. It was. But a lot of them were like, "Hey, man, thanks for telling this story." And I think it's important. I'm a good friend, actually, of John Stryker Meyer's Tilt.
Mm-hmm.
His stuff is great.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. There's of course there's plenty of SEAL books you can get, but when you so I work with a couple of or volunteer with a couple of organizations that really are focused on trying to get veterans to write, because saying, hey, I'm going to write a book is daunting. That's huge, that I'm going to churn out 250, 300 pages, but just putting something down, something in, whether it's only for you, whether it's to share with your kids at some point, or maybe you realize that, hey, I'm pretty good at this. So there's a couple. The Lethal Minds Journal is a real easy place to get stuff published and just kind of get your feet wet. Poetry, art, fiction, nonfiction. The Dead Reckoning Collective guys have got very, this veteran focused writing. I was able to sit in on I think it's a VA sponsored veteran writing workshop earlier this week. And just, people from all walks of life, Vietnam to active duty, that are, just like, hey, man, let me write. So I think, the big hurdle, the first hurdle is getting over the voice in your head that says you can't do it, or you're not a writer. And then sitting down and actually putting pen to paper and shutting that voice up.
How did you structure it? Obviously you had you had due outs, you were in a course. Is that what kept you an honest broker, having those deadlines from a class?
During the class, like I said, what I wrote there was a totally fiction book.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of kept you focused. The looming deadline of, hey, you want to graduate, you've got to write this for this book, for the actual memoir. Same thing. I had I told them a year. Probably, if I would have told them 6 months, I think I probably would have finished it in 6 months. But as it was, I took a little over 11. Right. And I would, there's often the thought, people say it all the time that, hey, if you don't write every day, you're not a writer. I would go for weeks, probably a month, without, the wheels churning, but not actually putting any words on paper. So, there's, people write, as many different ways as there are people. So, that's my thing is if, somebody tells you, hey, you can't write, or you're not a writer because you don't do this, or you don't do it this way or that way or my way. Stephen, right? Pressfield, who wrote Gates of Fire, Legend of Bagger Vance. He's got some
The
great
War of Art
books. Yeah, The War of Art. And a news, a weekly email that he sends out that's really just kind of focused. And I've had the chance to email with him a little bit. A great guy, and he offers great advice for young or I mean, not even young, anybody who's wanting to break into writing. And there's, like I said, there's tons of opportunity for it. So no excuse not to try, at least.
Yeah. I mean, it's our history. We lived it the last 20 years. We owe it to our communities to be able to sit down, and even if it's just a newsletter, even if you start a blog sharing lessons learned, war is cyclical. The same things that we went through, the same experiences, at some point, some young non-commissioned officer is going to sit there and be like, man, like, I really wish I had some lessons learned from somebody that's seen this type of stuff. And it turns out that a lot of the things that I went through after talking and reading the books of other Green Berets, I'm like, oh shit, these are lessons learned that I could have picked up from Barnes and Noble and been reading my entire military career.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember it was passed around like the Holy Grail when I was, when I came in '87. There was this list of just stuff, just patrolling tips. I think it's what it's called, and it was just everything. Make sure your mags are inserted so that the rounds facing out. This wrap rigger's tape around your canteen so that you have it. If you need it. Cut your toothbrush handle down to save weight. Plastic MRE spoon, like on 15 inches of 550 cord. Well, you can use that to sketch, or to use that. So I mean, there's just so many of these things that are. I found it the other day, and I was like sharing it with the young guys, and they're like, a lot of the equipment, they're like, what the hell is this? But a lot of them are just timeless things. Like coming back on your, as you try to head into an ORP, double backing on yourself, setting up, sprinkling CS powder, like all of these things that the guys in Vietnam had to figure out, are likely to, come back around. Maybe not. A lot of them were not as useful in the desert, potentially, but I think we'll probably come back around and find that they are. And then in the Jaff, it was kind of a big sniper battle. I had a sniper team there, and there was stuff clicking in my head that, I had read about Stalingrad and Lenin, the sniper battles there, and using, we were sticking hats up on sticks and observing, we found a sniper that way, watching a Iraqi, pulling like a brick that he had kind of chipped out, pulling it out and taking shots through. I'm like, man, I've read about this. So it's just, everything comes back around. Right. And the bigger the toolbox you have, the more capable you are of fixing any situation,
Absolutely. And
so I'm a big fan of reading.
It is. It's one of the things that we tend to lose when we're dealing with TBIs. And I tell guys, like, just because you have TBI, it doesn't mean the world's over. I survive it. I deal with it. Memory's compromised, but I got my reading back. And all you have to do is be committed. Don't put it off. Don't just settle for audiobooks. Don't settle for the limitations. Take some time, heal up, take a knee. And it is frustrating. Deal with migraines, but sit down for 10 minutes. Read for 10 minutes, even if you have to restart. And maybe you have to start with 5 minutes. I know when I was starting, it was very much 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Read, follow along with your fingers, don't lose place. And every morning, start back. Keep going with it. You will get that back. I know that at first I didn't want to engage with it. I'm like, I get migraines. I can't focus on anything unless I highlight and I follow along. But and that's the beauty of retraining yourself to read. And then afterwards, it was like I couldn't stop. I've read more in the last 3 years of my life than I ever had in school, ever had in SF, is because once you realize how easily you can lose something and how vital information is in these books, you're willing to do it. You're willing to sit down. Then you realize, like, oh shit, I can be a master of these things if I just dedicate myself to reading, dedicate myself to go back to school. It's all there. You have the power to do it. Don't just get comfortable with audiobooks and having somebody else read it to you in that awesome voice. Be willing to buy that actual physical book and challenge yourself. I know it's made a difference in my world. I could not see my life going back to not reading consistently. And it's really freaking awesome to be able to sit down with somebody and then pick up their book and be like, oh, damn, that is amazing. I just had that guy on the show.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always been since I was a kid, I was a big reader. And I mean, really kind of went down a little bit, as I was in the Marine Corps, especially as I got more senior and
Yep.
had kids, I was reading them books and reading Harry Potter or whatever. But, the reading for learning, is really ramped back up. And like you said, I get, just killer migraines. And sometimes just can't do it. But I've never been a fan of the audiobooks. I wish I was almost, so I could just learn more stuff. And I think once you hit a certain age too, you realize that, man, there's I'm on the downhill side, man, and there's so much shit that I want to learn. Right? There's I think that's one of the the things that a lot of veterans feel like, hey man, the best is over. And have trouble adapting and particularly with all the just insane amount of suicide and things like that. But I mean, man, the world's an awesome place. America is an awesome country. Not every day, but most days. And there's so much cool shit to learn and see and do and people to talk to, and so it breaks my heart when people decide for whatever reason they can't stick around for that. So I think the more we are curious, really, I mean, I think that's the key, right? It's just keeping a curiosity about everything around us, and
absolutely,
and reading certainly is a great way to get that fire burning.
It is, especially when it comes to understanding what we're dealing with. Rather than suffer in silence, be willing to pick up a book, be willing to engage and speak up, advocate for yourself in that doctor's office and say, hey, I'm dealing with this. I'm struggling with this. And then do the research. Research the things that you're finally getting a name for. Nobody knows that they're dealing with anxiety or depression until they go and talk to somebody. It's like, okay, cool. Let me go read about how maybe I can do some things on my own. Maybe it's not always about having medication. Maybe it's about understanding your environment. Maybe it's about understanding like, oh, wait a second, I isolate. Why do I isolate? Or I haven't been working out for the last 2 years. Maybe I can do something for myself to kick in my natural endorphins. Maybe I can do something. I know that was a big shift in my mentality when I started reading about everything I was going through and not feeling hopeless. Like, it's easy to sit down in front of a doctor's office and just be told what you're diagnosed with and say, oh, well, shit, that's it. The best years are over. Pack it in. And it's like, no.
Yeah. I mean, that's, a lot of, especially younger service members that we're kind of used to being told, hey, here's what you do. Here's what you do. Bullshit. Don't take a doctor's word on, what's going on inside of you. I mean, certainly, they know what they're doing, and I'm not a doctor, but, we've overcome a lot worse things, in combat and training. And I think it's, most things are surmountable problems if you, like you said, a lot of go back to doing what works, little steps, going to the gym, getting outside. I mean, that's, the VA, I wrote an article about it, a year or two ago, this Veterans Outdoor Recovery Act. They said, hey, we will fund outdoor recreational therapy to get, because it's, if you're cooped up in your room, playing a video game or in your bed, then no wonder, you've got issues. Get the hell outside, man. Go for a run or a walk or a bike ride or a paddle, I mean, whatever. And, we found as well that the act of just sitting down and writing, even if it's something you'll never show anybody, just stream of consciousness, whatever's going on in your head, getting it on paper makes it seem, not as overwhelming a lot of times. And a lot of people that start that realize that, hey man, I like this, let me journal every day. Let me write down some goals. I was listening to your, a couple of days ago, you're talking about goal setting, and I think that's one of the most powerful things that people can do is say, hey, where the fuck am I going? Figure out where am I going? And then, what are the baby steps, the checkpoints along the way that I need to use to get there. And, I have a high level of confidence in, on a former American service member ability to, move from checkpoint to checkpoint and start solving their own problems. Even if they don't in their own.
Yeah, we had a built-in system of achievement in the military. I remember even when I was just a young infantryman in the 82nd, you walked in the company area and you had a progress chart that showed all the schools like, okay, you're here. You want to get to the next step? You want to be a team leader? You got to go to this. Then you got to go to Ranger School. You got to go Air Assault. You got to, oh, now you got to look at broadening assignments, drill sergeant school, recruiter, all these things. Well, okay, well, I don't want to do recruiter. What do I do next? Oh, SF. Go to the Q course. Go to selection. You get selected. You walk into your team room. There's another manning roster with the same things. What's the next thing you do? You want to go to free fall school. You want to go to sniper school. You want to go all these different things. And you had all these different ways to achieve success. And it was progress. It was like, hey, now you want to be a senior in your MOS. You got to go this, this, and this. When you're on the outside, it can seem scary at first because there's nobody sitting there with you giving you a monthly counseling of how you can progress. But here's the beauty of it. Now it's you. You get to determine your success. You get to sit down every morning and say, I am going to set my intention for the day to do this because the greater overarching goal is to get here. And if I want to get there, I have these metrics I got to meet every month or every quarterly. I got to do this. And there's nobody else in the world that gets to come unless you're married. Unless you're married and you have kids, it's complete different. Then you have, little ones that you also have to take into account, and you have a wife that also has a say in that plan. But if you're not, that is the ultimate freedom to be and do what you want to do, and nobody else is getting in that way. Pursue the impossible. Pursue the things that you never thought you could do. You get done with being a MARSOC Raider or being a Green Beret or a Ranger or Navy SEAL or an infantryman or supply specialist or fuel specialist, whatever it was that you did in the military. And you're proud of that and you're great. And it took a lot to do that. Now you're on the outside. Set your sights, set your souls on something bigger, something that's of greater and may seem impossible to a lot of people. And the reason why I say that is because the world's full of people that want to do the bare minimum. The world is filled with people that just want to clock in at Popeye's Chicken or McDonald's or Subways and be in a service industry like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. But after 20 years of war, you deserve more. You were willing to enlist and fight and do what we needed you to do. You deserve to achieve the impossible again and do something amazing. Don't sell yourself short. If you're listening out there, go after something big.
And you're absolutely capable of it. The same things that made you successful in whatever, like you said, whatever job it was, can make you successful. Like you just don't have somebody else putting the chart on the wall. You don't have a NCO, yelling at you or signing you up to go to the rifle range or to do the things that you need to do to be successful. But a sheet of paper, a whiteboard, and just line out, where do I want to be in a year and 5 years? And if that, then X, right? The example I always use, because I do a lot of running, right? Is if you want to run a marathon in December, then I can easily come back and say, well, I need to be able to run a 10K or a half marathon by June. I need to be able to run a 10K here. Here's where my times kind of need to be if I want to do this. I think you talked about smart goals, right?
Yeah.
Specific, time it, make sure it's aligned with the vision of where you're going. It's, challenging, but realistic. I use the example all the time that, I can want really, really badly to play in the NBA. I think that ship has sailed. I'm 5'7". I have like 4-inch vertical jump. I'm 54 years old. It's not going to happen. That's not realistic. But that doesn't mean that your goal shouldn't be, kind of shooting for the moon.
Yeah.
It drives me batty, when I see people that expect veterans that sell themselves short, or accept good enough or kind of whatever the first thing that comes along. And if that it is an area where if a lot of there's stigma attached with talking to a head shrinker or talking to a counselor, finding somebody that's and not a pitch for me, but somebody that's a coach. That's I call myself a performance coach. Not a life coach or a strength and conditioning coach, but I'm just hey, I work with people that are trying to progress, try to get better. Finding somebody like that can give you some of the direction, or at least help you find the direction.
Yeah.
And that's when I started my company. I called it Walking Point, because the goal is it's your freaking patrol of life, man.
Yes.
You've got to walk point. If you're following David Goggins or John Dailey or anybody else, you're going to my destination, right?
Absolutely.
Or somebody else. You got to set your own destination. There's as a writer, I read a lot, and there's this guy Joseph Campbell that wrote a lot of the hero's journey, which is it's really applicable to
got his book.
Yeah. He's got a couple, but Hero with 1,000 Faces is kind of the one that started off. And he talks about there's a great quote from him when he was studying the Grail myth, Arthur and the Holy Grail, and when the Knights of the Round Table went in search of the Holy Grail, they all said, "Hey, man, we've got to go into the woods in different places, right? We can't follow each other because we've got to create our own path."
Yeah.
Each of us. And that's kind of allegorical, right? And that was his thing. He's like, "Hey, if you go into you step into the woods and you see a trail there, then you're in the wrong place, brother." Because you're following somebody else. You've got to be your own man or woman, or and do the thing that gets your heart pumping. You got to figure out what that is. And if it was used to be jumping out of airplanes, or scuba diving, or shooting steel, maybe it could still be that, but find whatever that is and do it. And generally speaking, I think we as veterans probably joined the military for a million different reasons, but one of them was to be of service. Like being service is something bigger to kind of help humanity, and I think when we find some way to give back, even though we're out now, we're not going to be blowing down doors and running into bad guys' houses in the middle of the night anymore. If we find some way to make ourselves useful, then I think we generally find a little more peace and happiness and success.
Yeah, absolutely. We are mission-driven individuals. We have we look for purpose, and in fields and areas where there is a great service to others. We want to help. We want to be the people that you can turn to when all hope is lost and everything's gone to shit. We want to be that guy that carries the ball and scores the fucking touchdown. That's who we are.
Exactly.
And if you find yourself selling yourself short by going into a profession that doesn't give you that feeling of purpose and passion, and it's not of service to others, walk the fuck away from there and be willing to reevaluate. Get back, shoot a different azimuth, and set a new course. Too many of us are spending 6, 7, 8 years doing something else that's not beneficial to us. Maybe it's great money, but at the end of the day, you go home and you're miserable and your family sees it. And then maybe, just maybe, you pivot and then you find something that you absolutely love. And then you're sitting there all those years later, like, man, I really wish I would have found myself doing this so much earlier. It's like, well, you can do that now. Learn from all of us, learn from all our mistakes. And before you transition, start thinking about the things that make you feel alive, that you love doing, where you feel like you're connected. And a great place, I always tell people, if you're able to go to one of their cohorts, is the Honor Foundation. It helped me greatly. It's helped countless of other soft professionals. And now they even have a program for regular active duty individuals, spacing the name of it. But check them out, honorfoundation.org, I believe. Yeah, honor.org.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
THF.org.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, they're a great. I volunteer coach for them for their cohort that's here near Camp Lejeune, and it's it's a phenomenal organization. I mean, it's really like getting an MBA, for free version, and all your classmates are people like you, right?
Yeah.
Who have stories similar to you that understand what you're going through. So that's I could not recommend that any more highly.
Absolutely. Well, John, thank you so much for being here today. The name of the book is Tough, Rugged Bastards. It's available for pre-order right now, correct?
It is on Amazon. You can walk into it's from Simon & Schuster. You can walk into a Barnes & Noble and order it there, but it won't, and you can order it. It just won't come to you until August 13th.
August 13th. Well, that's like almost here. Time goes by so much faster when you're out of the military.
Yes, it does.
John, thank you for being here today. Thank you for what you're doing. And I can't wait to have you back on here when the book is officially out to the public. And then we can just sit down and discuss the book itself in depth, brother. Thank you for being here. Thank you for what you do.
For having me.
And we'll see you all next time. Until then, take care.